If you are here, you wish to know. Welcome to What's New This Week, a weekly series where I speak about different releases that I found interesting so I could keep up on you also. Don't miss out on the new video game releases and anime to watch. The first thing we're gonna talk about today is Grifford Academy, which is a turn-based RPG about a bunch of kids that just so happen to go into a book world, and now they must prevail and survive, make new friends, and also fight with a bunch of different creatures that exist there, and have an adventure, and get back alive from this isekai world. Patapon 1 and 2 replay! So there's a remastered version of the Patapon series, the first two games. They decided to release it on modern consoles so people could play it, have fun, and also Ratatan soon will come out, the spiritual successor to Patapon. People could get acquainted with the series and use the drums to Patapon and use the rhythm in order to make sure that your tribe will prevail. The Unholy Trinity. It's a western. Trinity is the name of the city or town. In this western, there's Samuel Jackson that plays a gang leader, I suppose, someone who really wants gold. Pierce Brosnan plays the sheriff of the town in order to make sure that there will be some order on this frontier. And the third guy, which name I do not remember, sorry, he knows a way to how to find gold. This is why Samuel Jackson character needs gold, and the guy can provide it to him, but he probably won't. There's a conflict between the characters, and maybe find an interesting quest in the story. Watch the Skies, also known as UFO Sweden, about a girl that tried to find her father and there's a conspiracy theory with aliens maybe involved and maybe not, who knows, but her father is missing and she must find him. It's a European movie, and apparently they translated with AI visual dubbing technology. It says something about this in the description to the video. I'm curious how that worked, and so we will see. Dealing with Mikadono sisters may be a fun comedy. There's three geniuses that's all in the same school, and the one newbie guy who will be living with them and attending their house and do a housework. And I don't know why they're living together under one roof, but it's a premise for a comedy that will definitely happen here and there, and maybe there will be also something romantic. I was reincarnated as a seventh prince in season 2, but the whole name is I was reincarnated as seventh prince so I can take my time perfecting my magical ability. I heard people like the first one, who incredibly likes the first one, about little guy who knows OP magic and makes sure that the giant and the terrible demon looks like a little cute monetizable mascot plushie. So there's like a continuation where he will know even more magic and meets more different characters and continues his adventure. Rise of the Shield Hero Season 4! When the whole main squad travels to another land where the Shield Hero revered as a god, almost, which is an extreme change of pace because usually he's not treated well in this fantasy world, and now he respected well, kinds of different people. And of course there will be some other ordeals, and this time there's a lot of attention to Tiger Twins characters, so maybe we'll learn more about their story, how there will be companions to a Shield Hero. Of course Kevin Penn can also make the music. Dr. Stone's Ends Future Part 2! It's a fourth season of Dr. Stone, and here Senku and the other guys that they were fighting in with in previous part, they will unite together in order to find out who petrified the Earth and why, and there's yet another faction that they will have to fight with, and there's more and more technology going back into, what was it, an avia carrier? Have guns and bikes here. It's gonna be fun. Leviathan. It's a 3D CGI that looks good. They finally decided to make cel shaded 3D CGI, and here's World War I aesthetic with flying jellyfish and walking mecha robots. There's two characters that are main, maybe one on one side, one on the other, and they're using different technology. Maybe they need to make sure that the conflict won't happen, and there are also bats and giant whales, flying whales. The world seems interesting, so maybe it will be fun. Solo Camping Part 2. It's about 34-year-old guy who just wants to camp alone, do some solo camping, just have fun and relax, and the other girl that also interested in camping decided to camp with him, and that's why it's solo camping for 2, which doesn't make sense. But I suppose there's still gonna be a lot of fun situations that will happen during the guys just trying to relax, and the beautiful girl that just wants to be close to him. Everything's going to be great. I suppose it's drama comedy with Bryan Cranston. The family man wants to open his own theater, and his Younger-san wants to be actor in this theater, and they chasing the dream and struggling with it, people not understanding them, and it's relatable that people just want work, whatever they want to do, and it's not always turns great, but in the end, everything's going to be great. Nuked! It's a comedy about people that decided to party, and while they're partying, there's clear rockets that strike the country, apparently. So when they find out about it, they are panicking and trying to hide and discussing what they're gonna do because of this giant situation that's happening at this event. I like comedies like this, and definitely will have some fun. And I suppose one of the actresses is from True Blood. I'm pretty much sure that she's from True Blood. She was playing Irish girl that was insufferable. Tougen Anki! So it's a Momotaro story where the hero of justice Momotaro fought with demons, but here this battle still going on till this day, and apparently here demons are not that evil, and people with powers of Momotaro are also not just. And there's Onis from Oni Academy that's using blood powers in order to fight with Momotaro people. The main guy having revenge for his father. There's a lot of battles, and apparently not everything as it seems. And unfortunately, that's all I found interesting this week. If you want this channel to live and grow, please support me here on all social media. Share my videos with anything worth sharing. Do job platforms from YouTube to Twitch, to Trovo, to Blue Sky, to Twitter, to whatsoever. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next videos and streams. Bye.